Hello, everyone. Today we'll talk about what we are allowed or not allowed to do before the morning prayer. There's also laws about Mincha and Marv, but that's not for now. The other thing I wanted to say is that most of the halachic authorities ruled that because the time for morning service can start at Amud Shachar, Alut Shachar, or dawn, as we call it, then that's where this applies. But the Taz, who is one of the commentators on the Shulchan Aruch, actually says that it only starts from sunrise and not 72 minutes before. So I'm sure that there's leniencies in case that we always bring the minority opinion in order to give us leniencies in special circumstances. So, from the time of Amud Shachar, it is forbidden for a person to walk to the doorstep of his friend, father, or rabbi to greet them with a hello or address him in any other way. If he does, he shows that he is ascribing more importance and respect to that person than to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to God. For instead of standing in gratitude and prayer before Hashem, he first goes to greet that person instead. So that's the way that the halacha was written in the Gemara and Brachot, and there's other details that will change based on the way that we live today. So he gives a few examples and a few explanations when it is permitted. If a person passes someone's house and a sense of common courtesy deems it appropriate that he enter to greet them, he is permitted to say good morning to him. He may not say shalom, since Hashem's name is shalom, it's one of the 70 names, and it is not proper to honor a human being before with God's name before praying to Hashem. So we also have this law on Tisha B'Av, where we're not allowed to say shalom at all, and also during Shiva. And that all comes from the same source, which is basically shalom is a very honorable name. It's not one of the 7 names that can't be erased, but it is God's name. And so when we are in time of mourning, or we are in time of concentrating on the physical being that we just lost, whether it's the temple or a person, and then that's why shalom is not permitted. And so again, if you say shalom to somebody before Shacharit, you're basically saying, I treat you better or more respectful than God, and that's not appropriate. That's why we can say good morning or any other kind of blessing that does not include the word shalom. It's harder for me because I answer the phone shalom all the time, but I don't think anybody calls me at 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning. There was one time in the community that somebody called me, and I automatically answered shalom and he told me about his mother dying. So you can please forgive me. If he encounters someone along his way, meaning on his way to the synagogue, according to most poskim, he is permitted to say shalom since he did not intend to honor him, and they're both going the same direction to do the same exact thing. There are those who maintain that even in this case, it is better to say good morning and not shalom, so as to remind himself that he has not yet prayed, and so that he will not be delayed by engaging in a secular conversation before prayer. And that can only happen with somebody that you know really well. But again, if you are both on your way to shul, I think that is less of a problem. And he adds another example, that is the proper practice. If a friend who already finished praying met him on his way to synagogue and greeted him by saying shalom, he may respond shalom even though he has not yet prayed, because obviously the guy went to an earlier minyan and he's already after it, so you don't have to be rude and answer in a different way. If the guy says to you shalom, then you should answer with shalom. One last example or situation. This prohibition only applies when one walks to his friend, father, or rabbi in order to honor them. However, for the sake of a mitzvah, it is permitted. Therefore, if, for example, one's father needs to be accompanied to shul, one is permitted to wake up early, greet his father at his door, and take him to synagogue. He should say good morning to his father and not shalom, but of course, if that's what he's used to, then again, it's permitted because they're both getting there in order to go to shul. Similarly, if in order to honor one's elderly parents who are about to depart on a journey, one must accompany and help them. And if he prays first, he will arrive too late to help. Or the opposite, if he prays early, that means that he's praying before dawn, then that's definitely forbidden. So he must first recite Birkot Shachar, blessings of the morning, and then escort them to the airport and subsequently pray. His father will pray on the plane. That's just a practical explanation of how this works. And the same rule applied when one needs to greet his parents upon their return, also again in the airport. So I'll just, before we go on to the next paragraph, I'll just give an example. There's a Jerry Seinfeld episode, which I couldn't find, but he promised to give this very elderly couple a ride to the airport, and he hears moving around 4 o'clock, and so he just comes down to check, and they're already all dressed and packed and waiting for him to just get his act. So again, people who are elderly sometimes behave that way, and so we should respect it. And even if it's before Amud Shachar, we should try to be as kind and courteous. Hashem does not want us to cause people to suffer mentally or emotionally because of God's honor. So that's why it's important to remember that situation. And so it just continues with another detail about this, about not dealing with business, which is so obvious, but the halacha talks about everything. So from the time of Amud Shachar, it is prohibited to deal with one's work before praying. This is because holy matters precede secular matters, and the respect of heaven precedes the needs of people. Therefore, it is necessary to first thank Hashem in prayer, and only afterwards deal with one's needs. The Chachamim teach anyone who prays and afterwards goes on his way, HaKadosh Baruch Hu grants him what he desires. And so there's several stories from our history where people lost business opportunities because of keeping this law. Rabbi Rosner, a few years ago, actually in the context of Parshat Vayikra, talked about somebody who was very upset when his family didn't call him from the yeshiva when he was studying after shul, and the reason why he was upset was because he lost a business deal. So he said, "Please call me anytime that somebody comes to the door asking for something related to our business." And so the next time that somebody came to his door was actually somebody collecting money, and he got upset at them for disturbing his learning. And they said, "Well, you told us." And he says, "There's a difference. This one, the first one was going to give me money. This one is taking money from me." So that's hypocritical, obviously, and we should treat everybody with the same respect. So if you have a set time for learning, then Hashem comes first, and that's it. No questions asked, and that way we will be blessed with Hashem's blessings to get what we need and even what we want sometimes. And that's I think the lesson from this. It is preferable to pray individually before beginning to work instead of praying in a minyan after he has begun to work. So let's say that somebody has to work on a Sunday. In North America, it's very applicable. Somebody has to work on Sunday, and the shul minyan is only at 9 a.m. So he should, according to this explanation, an example, should actually pray biyachid individually at home before beginning to work instead of waiting until the minyan that starts at 9. So he gives a different example because in Israel, Sunday is a regular work day. For example, if a person must start work at 6:30 a.m. and the only minyan in the area is at 7:30 a.m., it is better that he prays individually before work begins so that he does not work prior to praying. I know that in schools in Israel, even though most schools start at 8 a.m., the guard and some other staff have to be there already around 7:30. And so this is a very, very practical thing in Israel. Again, the example I gave from North America could be other days and other times, but I think that this is very self-explanatory. Last but not least, however, before Amud Shachar, a person is permitted to deal with his work, for since the time of Shacharit has not yet arrived, he is not considered to be putting his needs before prayer. So if a person wakes up at 3 o'clock in the morning, that's definitely before Amud Shachar. Today, Amud Shachar here in Fredericton was 5:57. I don't know that I saw yesterday what the time is in Washington, but around the same time. And so if you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're allowed to deal with your business because you're not allowed to daven yet. So he must be strict in saying Birkot Shachar before that. So the time to recite them is immediately upon waking up, just to remind us of Birkot Shachar and Birkot Torah. Since he started his work before the time to pray began, he is permitted to continue even after Amud Shachar on condition that he succeeds in praying before the time to pray lapses. And so that's something that will be more applicable with Mincha and Marv, because we'll see that there's things that you're not allowed to do before Mincha or before Marv. And it really comes to question for Hanukkah candles, because most people don't finish work before the time for candle lighting starts. And so, but this idea is if you have a set time to go to davening, whether it's 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, doesn't matter. If you woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning and started working, as long as you know that you set an alarm and made sure to be there for that minyan, then you are permitted to continue even after dawn. And so I'll stop the recording and we'll open up to questions.